It's the Metro on WDET. I'm Robyn Vincent. The polls are open in Michigan today. And by tonight, most of us will have done the thing we're told is our civic duty. Or we won't have. In the last August primary, less than a quarter of Michigan voters turned out. So here's the question I want to sit with today. If you voted this morning or you dropped your ballot off at a drop box last week, have you done your part? Eric Liu has spent years arguing that the answer is no, and that the no is good news. He was a White House speechwriter for Bill Clinton and later Clinton's deputy domestic policy advisor. He co-founded Citizen University in Seattle. It runs something called Civic Saturdays, a gathering built kind of like a church service with singing and readings and a sermon. And these Civic Saturdays have happened here in Detroit. His new book is Live Like a Citizen, out in October. Eric Liu, welcome to the Metro.
It's so great to be here, Robyn. Thank you.
And before we begin, I want to say again, polls are open today till 8 p.m. and you can cast a ballot today even if you forgot to register ahead of time or if you moved. All you have to do is visit your city or township's clerk office and bring proof of residency. That's a utility bill or a lease agreement. And you can find more info at vote411.org/Michigan. That's vote411.org/Michigan. Okay, Eric, it's election day here. For those of us who already voted, there's a feeling among some like, okay, we've done our part. We've participated in democracy. We've helped uphold the system. What would you say to that?
Well, I mean, I think actually I'm so delighted to be here. I would amend slightly your introduction when you said, that my answer to have you done enough if you voted today, that my answer would be no. Actually, to take a page from improv lessons, my answer isn't no, it's yes and. I think voting is a core part of what it means to participate in democratic self-government. If you actually have citizenship and are eligible to vote, then to me that's a necessity. I think it is, while necessary though, not sufficient. And so I think there are so many other ways, the other 364 days of the year, for us actually to think about how we show up and how we shape the culture of the places where we live and how we actually make democracy not an abstraction, but just a thing that is part of our everyday lives.
So in other words, those moments where people feel really empowered casting their votes, you're saying you want them to package that up, that feeling of empowerment, and think about ways that they can be doing things, moving through this world to feel that empowerment on a daily basis.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, look, your primary today is a hugely consequential election. And as you know, people around the country are going to be paying attention to the results later tonight. And I think every time there is an election, whether it's a primary like today or a general election, whether it's in off years or midterms or a presidential year, it is worth for a moment stepping back and appreciating the miracle that a society can peacefully and in a fully participatory way choose its representatives and its leaders and not have to resort in general terms to other forms of solving problems like violence. And I think that is a miracle. And so when you cast your ballot, yeah, that feels special. That's an awesome thing. And you can feel empowered. And it's exactly right, Robyn. What I would say is that moment of empowerment is part of a much bigger tapestry of ways that we, as everyday members of a community, actually get to practice power. And this is so much a central focus of our work at Citizen University. We define citizenship not in terms of the legal sense of documentation status and passport holding and the rest, but more this broader ethical sense of, are you a member of the body? Are you a contributor to community. And when you define citizenship in that broader ethical sense, you can boil it down to this very simple equation, Robyn, which is power plus character equals citizenship. To live like a citizen requires both that we understand how power works in a community and in a country, and that we not only get literate and be able to read power, but we understand how to write power and how to join and participate and activate other people and activate ourselves to change the game and the story and the equation of power where we live. And then to couple that literacy and power, though, with a set of values and norms that are not just about me, not just about the now and the short term and me and my kind, but are about kind of values and norms of reciprocity and service and mutuality and responsibility to the greater good. That's the character side of the equation. And those kinds of things, power plus character, we get a million chances every week in our everyday lives to practice both of those, to cultivate character and to practice power. And our message at Citizen University is to be mindful of all those other opportunities, all those other days, to build that kind of civic muscle.
When you talk about building this type of civic muscle, I mean, we're in a time when good character is not being put on display at the highest office.
Mm-hmm.
How do we work on that?
I think actually it's precisely a time like this that human nature, and especially I would say American human nature, is for people where they live, rooted in place and relationship, to turn to each other and say, how can we be the best that we can be for each other? You know, let me be more concrete. You mentioned in the outset one of our programs is called Civic Saturdays, and these are gatherings where we have a program where we're training people around the country to lead these gatherings that are like a civic analog to a faith gathering. And a few months ago, our team trained a group of men, actually, black men from Flint, to lead Civic Saturdays. And they are people who have grown up in that city, who have grown up living with and living through all of the breakdowns of actual physical infrastructure in that city. And what they've decided to do is to take responsibility for the invisible civic infrastructure, for the norms and the values and the habits that people have in that town, so that people don't just fall into a pattern of helplessness and powerlessness, but awaken the sense of, you know what, we can, at a small scale, show up for each other and look out for each other and show that kind of character, but also understand power and understand how you change things at the scale of North Flint or Flint as a whole, or that part of Michigan.
I want to think a little bit more about that chapter in your book that's set in Flint, because your team convened 13 black men, early 20s to mid 60s, and you asked them what citizenship feels like in their lives. And you write that you expected cynicism. I want you to talk a little bit more about what you got instead.
Yeah, what we got instead, Robyn, was just this kind of awesome, awe-inspiring sense of commitment and recommitment. These residents of Flint, these citizens, have every reason to be cynical, not just because of the water crisis, not just because of the failures of so many public systems and elected leaders, but frankly, because of the history of the last few generations. And one of the things that one of these men said was just this recognition that the Great Migration that brought so many of their families to Flint brought with it also this sense of, okay, we have to look out for each other. We have to build the norms and the structures of how we decide things, how elders look out for youngers, how we keep an eye on neighbors who might be struggling, and that over the decades, some of those norms broke down. And what these participants really said and what they embodied was this feeling of what I would simply call civic faith, this belief that, you got to take a leap. You got to be the one. You can't just look around and say, well, everything's breaking down, everything's on fire, everything's broken. You take a little leap and say, well, if I'm the one who shows up and invites others to join a circle that says, maybe we can make things a little bit better on this block, that can be contagious. And that was surprising to me, Robin. I was braced for much more of the cynicism that in some ways is deserved and would be understandable. And it was truly awe-inspiring to see how committed they were to actually spreading this sense of civic faith.
Well, I want to make this concrete if we could, because the man that you're referring to, I believe his name is Patrick McNeil. He runs the North Flint Neighborhood Action Council. And what he described as missing, it wasn't the water system or the jobs. It was something smaller, to your point. He was talking about the way Black families built a whole civic life in Flint after the Great Migration. And he mentioned a rule on his block. Mm-hmm. Here's where things get a little bit more concrete. If 4 out of 5 households on your block have been mowing their grass, but the fifth hasn't, and an elder on the porch points that out to you, it's your job to go mow it. Why did that stick with you?
Because that was such, I mean, on the one hand, that was such an old school way of um, responsibility taking. Yes, if you're Patrick and you see that elder look at you that way. But frankly, it's even more an old school norm of responsibility kind of emanation. That elder feeling empowered to look at you and say, come on now, this is what we got to do, not only for the sake of that fifth neighbor on the block who hasn't managed to be able to mow their lawn, but also recognition that the block itself requires for a sense of kind of mutual self-respect, that we take care of it and ourselves and each other, right? And I think that's a mindset that basically you can boil down to we're all better off when we're all better off. And that is not the prevailing mindset today, as you said, Robin. I mean, we live in an age that is every man for himself. And so I think when you see, as I do, all over the country, all over Michigan, I've seen, I mean, up in Grand Rapids and Grosse Pointe, people we've worked with in Midtown Detroit who are in various programs just trying to catalyze at a human scale, at a relational scale, that sense of responsibility sharing, responsibility taking that changes a culture.
Eric, I'm wondering why you think we've lost those old school norms of collectivity and why we feel so much more individualistic and like we're all out there for ourselves.
Oh, Robin, I mean, I think this has been unfolding through our lifetimes. I think there's one layer of this is, of course, the material reality, which is that over the last 40, 50 years, life in the United States has become so much more economically unequal. Clout, wealth, forget about wealth, just economic opportunity, the feeling of easy access to the American dream has concentrated into fewer and fewer hands in our lifetime, right? That's why you have the volatility of our politics. That's why Michigan is a bellwether. That's why so many people are so cranky in your state and in states all around the country right now. And I think when you get that kind of evaporation of a promise of shared opportunity, then you get that instinct of scarcity thinking. You get that instinct of, I got to look out for myself. Enough of this naivete about community and worrying about the guy next door. The guy next door might be eating my lunch, right? And I think that feeling becomes contagious. So that's one layer. And Robin, I think the other layer, honestly, is just, we've been going through so many demographic changes in the United States. If you think about, again, 50 years ago, I know you have a highly contested Democratic Senate primary today, but just step back a second. 50 years ago, it would have been unthinkable that your two leading contestants in the Democratic primary in the state of Michigan would be, a Muslim physician and a white woman. That just wasn't part of the kind of givens of political culture 50 years ago. And that is a great thing that we've become more inclusive. But the more inclusive we've gotten, the more that people in every part of the public square are participating, the more there is this feeling of, there's a lot more competition for jobs, for attention, for everything else. And I need to kind of pull back and find my own kind. And that feeling of identity politics has been present, certainly on the right. President Trump has ridden to glory in many ways, understanding those anxieties, that kind of status anxiety that comes when a society becomes more diverse. But it exists on the left as well, and I think that kind of all those forces together, Robin, lead to this feeling of I got to look out for myself, and I think one of the things that we've got to do here, this conversation itself, I'm so grateful for it because we often say in our work at Citizen University, what we're doing is countercultural. The dominant culture in the United States is hyper-individualistic, is market obsessed and market minded, and we think about each other as commodities. And the third force that's driving that same sense of individualism is online life, which you think, well, they call it social media, but it's social in a sense that makes us super isolated. We become alone together, in the words of the sociologist Sherry Turkle. And we're looking at things on social media and always comparing ourselves to people in this way that makes us feel all the more alone. So you add these things
Eric,
up and you get a political culture of hyper-individualism.
but Eric, if I may here, you are so much going against the grain in the U.S. to say that I want to be a part of a collective versus an individualistic nation, because that's what this country has been founded on. These are the deeply ingrained ideals. How do you push back against a nation that at its core has told us I should be as individualistic as possible?
I'm not trying to push against the nation. I quite believe in the individual and the centrality of individual choice, genius, wisdom in any free society. So don't hear me wrong. But hyper-individualism, a society that just becomes all about self and egotism and narcissism. Alexis de Tocqueville, when he was wandering through the young United States 200 years ago, he saw this coming. He saw that when you have a society that is free, over time, as he put it, every man ends up feeling left to himself and having to make his own way. And that kind of feeling of isolation is part and parcel of, comes along with freedom. We just have to manage, that's a downside of the upside of freedom. But I think the other thing that I would say that isn't pushing against the nation, but it is reminding us of what, as human beings, we are wired to want. Everybody. I don't care how individualistic you are. I don't care how much you believe in, don't tell me what to do. Every human being wants to be part of something greater than themselves. No one wants to be isolated. And we're living through this epidemic of loneliness right now in the United States, an epidemic that has, had so many visible and invisible social costs, mental health crises, opioid epidemics, and so forth. And that's because people on a deep spiritual level don't want to feel this cut off from each other. They don't want to have to feel, especially in times of change and upheaval, that they have to figure everything out for themselves.
But it seems, Eric, that it is a question of bridging a lot of different worlds. I mean, you've got a resume that says Yale, Harvard Law, the Clinton White House, the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. You are part of a well-funded world that's thinking really hard about democracy. How do you connect your world with Patrick McNeil's world in Flint?
Oh, I connect it completely on the level of spirit and purpose. And I connect it by learning profoundly from people like Patrick and organizations and clubs like the North Flint Neighborhood Action Council. These big ideas that we're talking about do, at the end of the day, result from simple choices that we make. All of our civic culture is just a matter of choices that you and I make about whether to show up, whether to join, whether to look someone in the eye and truly see them, whether to forbear when you hear something you don't quite like or you're not quite sure you're supposed to like.
Eric, may I jump in right now to ask you, what kind of value do you put on some of those small actions, like looking someone in the eyes when you pass them on the street and saying hello and saying, how you doing?
Robin, that to me is that's the very essence of democratic life. That
Say
that
more.
you, well, I mean, again, voting matters, and everybody go out and vote today. But if you live in a society where you can't see each other, and you don't want to look each other in the eye, forget about saving the soul of America. If you can't save the soul of North Flint by actually seeing your neighbors, then we're lost. And I think we live in an age of such profound dehumanization. That's why this new book I've written, Live Like a Citizen, is organized around 8 elemental verbs: how to see, how to listen, how to feel. We don't give each other permission in public space to feel or to name grief or pain or loss, much less love or joy. And yet, if you're honest about it, all politics is pain relief. And so our ability to sense each other's pain and how we're hurting, our willingness to ask someone, not even a neighbor, maybe a stranger, when you see, hey, how you doing? Are you okay? It looks like you're having a hard day. Our willingness and ability to do that, that's the building block of any self-governing society. And so, even if voter turnout in the primary were 100%, if, on the other days of the year, we just were in our lanes or looking at our phones and just not dealing with each other as humans, our democracy still would be profoundly sick.
It's the Metro on WDET. I'm Robyn Vincent. My guest is Eric Liu, co-founder of Citizen University, a speechwriter for President Clinton and later his deputy domestic policy advisor, and a President Obama appointee to the board of the Corporation for National and Community Service. His forthcoming book is Live Like a Citizen, one of many he's written. Next, we're going to have him make the case that being a good citizen means fighting more, not less. And he'll tell us what he learned about all of this from his mother, who joined a Chinese choir, even though she couldn't carry a tune. We'll be right back. It's the Metro on WDET. I'm Robyn Vincent. It is Election Day in Michigan. Polls are open until 8 o'clock tonight. And if history holds, many of us won't vote, though you should. My guest today argues that showing up at the ballot box is just part of what citizenship asks, and that the rest of it is more demanding and better company. Eric Liu was a speechwriter for President Clinton and later his deputy domestic policy advisor. He now runs Citizen University in Seattle, which gathers people for something called Civic Saturdays. Think of it as a civic version of a church service with singing and readings and a sermon. His forthcoming book is Live Like a Citizen: 8 Ways to Change Your Mindset and Our Country. Eric, before the break, we were in Flint. I want to now talk about fighting, because chapter 5 of your book is called How to Fight, not how to be civil, which we've been discussing as well, not how to find common ground, how to fight. Why did you want that word in there?
Because I think it's being real with people. Obviously we live in a hyperpolarized time, and more civility is better than less civility. But if you want to be real, you have to recognize not only is it okay in American civic and political life to argue and to fight, it's necessary. America is an argument from the get-go. I mean, this is our 250th year. Let's recognize that even baked into the Declaration are ideas that are always in tension. Freedom and equality are always in tension with each other. If you are free to do whatever the heck you want, eventually you're going to step on my equality. And on the other hand, if I'm trying to make everybody equal at all times, I'm going to step on your freedom. These things are always in tension, and we are supposed to argue local versus national. We argue that right now. And I think all of these ways in which we live together in a continental union like this mean that we are signing up for perpetual arguments, perpetual contests over ideas and interests. And the point of American civic life isn't to have fewer arguments, it's to have less stupid ones. And I think right now we have this culture that is making us dumber and dumber in the way that we fight, where we just take the most polarized, extreme versions of stances in a people, and we just dehumanize and flatten each other. And so this chapter of the book is about saying, like a grown-up, here's how you can fight. Again, union, forget about the national union of any marriage that lasts because the people, the partners recognize that they have to get better at how they deal with conflict, about how they fight. And that's also true in our civic life. There are healthier ways to do this, and we can actually practice that.
Okay, so one of your rules for doing this, for fighting better, for fighting more like a grown-up, is to take winning off the table. Eric, in an election year, in this political moment, that's going to sound to some people like unilateral disarmament. Make the case.
Well, there are certainly zero high stakes moments like an election for which you literally can't take winning off the table. That's a particular kind of fight where there is a goal that's it's binary, you win or you lose. But I'm talking about fights like the argument you will have with your relative, with your coworker or neighbor today about today's election, for instance, right? About the candidate you think is the best person to choose in a primary. And when I say take winning off the table, that's the first principle of what I call a better argument. It's not so much, it's not unilateral disarmament. It's saying if you come into this discussion and say, okay, I want to engage here not to try to win and beat you on debating points and humiliate you in the course of this debate. I want to engage you actually to learn. I want to understand, why do you see things the way you do? Why is it that your point of view says that the only possible candidate is this person when I think it's that person? I just don't get it. Like, truly, I'm not trying to play gotcha. I'm not trying to ambush you. I really want to understand where you're coming from. If you can sincerely do that, it completely changes the energy of the interaction. And that person then has permission to actually get honest with you. And you set in motion a positive feedback loop of hearing and seeing each other. Again, you don't have to change each other's minds, and you don't have to have, some scorekeeper tallying up points of who won this debate. This is simply a question of, can we learn from each other? And it doesn't even need to be reciprocated. If you do that and the other person's still being just a classic, debater jerk and trying to own you and be snarky or whatever, so be it. You're still trying to learn something. And I think that in so many of our everyday contexts of how we deal with each other relationally, is a habit that I think when we practice it, it compounds in beneficial ways.
I mean, you say that prioritizing relationships over facts is the way to do this. Facts are my whole job. Convince me. Convince me how to hold both of these. Because there are a lot of us who we're talking to someone, we know what they're saying to be patently false. And try as we might, it is difficult sometimes to sit there and let someone go on and on with a viewpoint that isn't true. How do you prioritize the relationship over the facts?
There is this line that's out there in the culture that, facts don't care about your feelings, right? And what I say in the book is actually the inverse is true as well. Feelings don't care about facts. That's actually the deeper truth about human nature. What you just said a moment ago, Robyn, like, facts are my whole job, right? So what I hear you saying there is not, let's have an argument about fact. What I hear you saying is you have an identity as a journalist that you've built professionally, that is part of a whole kind of faith in fact, right? And so to me, what I'm tuning into is that you're feeling that your whole way of work, that maybe your whole life, Robyn, is under threat right now in this culture. And if I'm not tuning into those emotions in what you're saying there, and I just kind of come at you with a rational argument about why, oh, don't worry so much, Robin, about facts. Like everybody can sort it out and da 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 da. Then you're just going to not feel heard, right? And that's true of everything. If you don't feel heard, no amount of rational, fact-centered argumentation is going to shift you. But if you do feel heard, I'm not saying that that changes everything, but it creates the possibility that you can now meet somewhere in the middle. And now that person who you're so frustrated with, if you actually make them feel heard, they might be able to let down their guard and be like, okay, 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 I get it. I see that you really are trying to understand how I'm feeling. Now tell me what you think, right? And that opens the possibility. And that's all we can hope for. What we know doesn't work is the online style of just throwing things at each other in a way that isn't really meant to persuade, but is just meant to perform.
Meaning you got to get face to face with folks. And all of this starts in your eyes, maybe with that first interaction when you're walking down the street and you say hello to someone and you look them in the eyes. But Eric, if I may, I want to put the harder version to you. There's a real critique of the bridge building world right now.
Yes.
That both sides' framing is out of date when one side holds power, and that the moment calls for opposition, not dialogue. What is your answer to that?
I think a democracy is a complex adaptive system where like a marketplace, where lots of people are going to do lots of things for lots of motivations, some of which contradict each other, some of which might cancel each other out. So I think it's a both and. When you have a party in power that you believe is undermining the rule of law and undermining, the functioning of self-government, then yeah, it is appropriate for one form of action to be kind of focused resistance against that. And we're seeing that. But at the same time, in a complex adaptive system where part of the breakdown is just that we've stopped in our neighborhoods, in our communities, in our workplaces, knowing and seeing each other, being able to deal on a human relational level, then it's also the case that part of the work that has to happen is that rehumanization. And these are two different parts of the work right now. And the first part that plays out on a day like Election Day is about a fight that is zero sum and that has winners and losers. And the second part is about the other days of the year where either we can live together, live with each other across all of our differences and diversity, or we start to retreat from each other and eventually start to desire that the other kind of person just gets wiped off the face of the earth. And we've seen around the earth right now, around the planet, what happens when you get too deep into that latter cycle of dehumanization. So to me, it's constantly a both and. And look, I've worked in politics. I've done the version that is about zero-sum contests and so forth. But I do what I do right now because I think this deeper foundational layer of our broken culture is what I want to put my energies to.
Well, Eric, you talk about working in politics and the way times have changed. I mean, you worked in the Clinton White House, and the Trump White House is a very, very different place, one that is unrecognizable to a lot of people. How has the work that you've been doing adapted and evolved in this moment when we're talking about trying to reach across the table, trying to connect with people, trying to build these bridges, trying to become better citizens? I mean, I'm imagining that there has been some rapid recent evolution in the way you're doing this work.
Well, our work has just deepened in its earliest commitments to place and relationship. We believe 100% in the local, not the local as kind of parochial, like, hey, leave me alone, I'm just focusing on my little town here, but what I call network localism. We train what we call civic catalysts all around the country in all these programs, not just Civic Saturdays, but other programs. One's called Power Plus Character for teachers and educators. One's called Live Like a Citizen for community leaders and so forth. One's called the Civic Collaboratory. That's a mutual aid format. And we train people who are not thinking about this at the level of national abstraction, but they're thinking about it from how do things work in Traverse City? How do things work in Ann Arbor? How do things work in my part of the town where I can come to know people and where you can't just torch people because you're going to keep on dealing with each other over and over again? And
Eric,
to me,
if I may,
yeah,
one observation as you're speaking right now that I'm noting is perhaps something that has evolved in your work, and it is the sense that people feel like they have power at the local level in a
yes.
way that they did not necessarily feel before. And that is because a lot of folks feel powerless when they look at the federal government, when they look at what's happening nationally. Is that something you're trying to seize in this moment?
Well, yes, but again, I think, let's make something explicit that's a little implicit in both your question and what we've been saying. Citizen University is not a left-wing resistance organization. We
Sure.
work in a cross-ideological way, and there are so many principled conservatives and libertarians, so many people on the center right now, who are just as concerned and distressed about not only this administration's actions to challenge the rule of law and the kind of executive overreach and so forth, but who've been concerned about over the course of the last 3, 4 decades, the way that all politics has become national, and all of our sense of responsibility taking at the local level has evaporated. So there are people on the left, right, and center who have been both worried about this and who are finding, to your point, Robyn, affirmative purpose in reconnecting with place and people, right? And yeah, that is where you can exercise agency and power. That is where you can see the results of your joining. You can see the results. I tell the story in this book about a woman named Rosa Chang in Lower Manhattan who every day would just walk through this kind of dead zone, this negative space underneath the Brooklyn Bridge. And after walking through that for months, she just stopped one day. She's like, wait, why is this like this? Like, why is this beautiful, possibly vaulting space under here just kind of like leftover dumping ground for various city departments? And she got a bee in her bonnet to start asking neighbors and start asking local officials and start asking, kids in the skate park and artists and architects around, like, hey, couldn't this place be something better or something different? And out of that persistence evolved this whole endeavor that's now called Gotham Park, where they turned that underbelly of the Brooklyn Bridge into this vibrant public space. Things like that are happening in every part of our country every day right now. And so the powerlessness that people feel about national politics, whether they like it or not, whether they approve of this president or not, can be so contrasted with the agency that you feel when you choose to practice power and cultivate character where you live.
So someone's listening in their car right now. They voted this morning. They want to know what you're actually asking them to do. I mean, I'm hearing that you're saying be engaged with your surroundings, that you take a more curious lens to life around you. What else is it? I mean, I realize another one, and because we're running out of time, I'm just going to name it. One of your other answers is to join something.
Yes, I'm
And
so glad you said that. That was literally going to be my answer, Robyn.
and
Join.
the person
Yes.
you credit for teaching you that is your mother. She joined a church and a Buddhist temple without being religious, and she joined a Chinese choir even though she couldn't carry a tune. What was she really after?
She was after not being alone, Robyn. She was wired this way, I think, to join and to be part of things. But she came to this relentlessness after my father died suddenly. And she needed to not be alone. And she just decided that she was going to join neighborhood groups and professional associations and Chinese community groups and one thing after another to participate. And to me, if I had to boil down your question, Robyn, it comes down to, the example of my mother is not just join a club, which is my bottom line advice to everybody listening. Join a club, any kind of club, any issue. It doesn't have to be political, just join. The practice of being part of a thing that meets over and over again, where you get to know people, is the rehearsal room for democracy. But the part about my mother's story that I think is super important also for your listeners is, again, tune into what hurts. Tune in to what is missing in your life, in your family's life, in your neighborhood's life, and let that be the motive for what you join and why. So that you're not doing this at some intellectual level. We are hurting in so many ways in this country. And I think grief, if left to fester, just turns into grievance. But grief, if actually tended and cultivated and opened up in this way that is not just alone, can blossom into this kind of joining that leads to a sense of civic power and civic purpose.
Eric Liu is the co-founder and CEO of Citizen University. His forthcoming book is Live Like a Citizen: 8 Ways to Change Your Mindset and Our Country. Eric, thank you so much.
Robyn, thank you. It's so good to be with you.
And as we've been discussing, today is Election Day. Polls are open until 8 p.m. and you can cast a ballot today even if you forgot to register to vote ahead of time or if you moved. You can just visit your township's clerk office, bring a proof of residency like a utility bill or a lease agreement. You can find out more info at vote411.org/Michigan. We encourage you to lift up your voice today. You can help shape the future of WDET. Our annual listener survey is open now. It is quick and anonymous. Let your voice be heard this way, too. We are community-powered here at WDET, and the listener survey is one of the best ways to share your thoughts on the station's programming. Take the survey today at wdet.org/survey. That's wdet.org/survey. Coming up, our politics today don't look like they did in the early 2000s. Next, we'll talk about what we can learn from that time and what we should leave behind with former Michigan Governor Jennifer Granholm. We'll be right back on the Metro. Stay with us.